हरिः ओम् नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अष्टाध्यायी परिचयः इत्यस्य अद्य त्रयस्त्रिंशः पाठः। अस्मिन् वर्गे अत्सन्धौ प्रकृतिभावः कथं विधीयते तस्य सूत्राणि पश्यामः। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य द्वे प्रयोजने अष्टाध्याय्याः आहत्य षट्शतस्य सूत्राणां व्याख्यासहितम् उदाहरणसहितं च अध्ययनं, तथा च अष्टाध्याय्याः प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य द्वितीयपादस्य च कण्ठस्थीकरणम्। अच् सन्धिप्रकरणस्य अध्ययनं प्रचलत् अस्ति। तत्र पूर्वयोः द्वयोः पाठयोः मिलित्वा अस्माभिः अच् सन्धिः कुत्र कुत्र भवति इत्यस्मिन् विषये चर्चा कृता। तत्र आदिमे पाठे अच् सन्धौ पूर्वादेशः कथं भवति, तत्र तुगागमः, यणादेशः, नो चेत् यान्तवान्तादेशः इति त्रयः पूर्वादेशस्य विषयाः कैः सूत्रैः कथं विधीयन्ते तत् अस्माभिः अधीतं। तदनन्तरं पूर्वस्मिन् पाठे अच् सन्धौ एकादेशः कथं विधीयते तस्मिन् विषये अपि चर्चा कृता। There was a question that somebody asked me over the email. It was related to one of these sutras, so Etyedhatyutsu. The question was that if you go to the website for Etyedhatyutsu, you will see a lot of vartikas that have been discussed. So for example, multiple, like 4 or 5 vartikas have been discussed towards the end. Akshaduhinyam upasankhyanam swadhirerenyo and so on. So are we not going to learn these vartikas? So the answer is no, we are not going to learn these vartikas, because all these vartikas talk about some badha of guna or vruddhi or savarna dirgha in some very rare specific examples. So this course is more about just an overview, Ashtadhyayi Parichayaha. So I do not want to get involved in Vartikas unless they are extremely fundamental. Like for example, Ru and Lu Varnas are Savarnas. So Rulu Varnayoho Mitha Savarnyam Vachyam. This is a very fundamental Vartika. Or later on you will study Ru Varna Nasyanatvam Vachyam. This is yet again a very fundamental Vartika. So unless a Vartika is extremely fundamental, I am not going to teach any Vartikas. We are only going to focus on the sutras. Of course, if you are interested, you are most welcome to go to the website, open up the sutra and read the Vartikas. And if there are any questions, you can reach out to me. But as far as the syllabus is concerned, I don't expect you to know Vartikas, and there will not be any questions on them in the homeworks or in the exam. So that was about the sutras that give the Ach Sandhi. Now the sutras that do not give the Ach Sandhi or that block the Ach Sandhi, specifically or typically classified under the name of pracriti bhavaha. So these are the sutras that we are going to study today. So 61122 sarvatra vibhasha goho. This numbering is actually not correct. The prakriti bhava starts at, I think, a little earlier. Prakrutyaha padam, somewhere over here. Prakrutya antah padamavyapare. So starting from this sutram 61115, the prakriti bhava starts and it goes all the way up to 61128 rutyakaha. So this is the section of prakriti bhava. And what is prakriti bhava? At sandhivishiteshu sutreshu satsu api samhitayaha vivakshayam api sandhikaryam na bhavati. So that is the topic that we are going to study today. We are only going to study 5 sutras. Out of that, the sutram that actually talks about prakriti bhava is only one. So as I mentioned, there are so many sutras over there, starting from 61115 up to 61128. We are only going to learn one sutram of prakriti bhava because that is the most important, most central sutram that gives prakriti bhava. Rest all either give prakriti bhava optionally or are only specific to the Vaidika context. So we will keep those aside and we are going to talk about a single sutram, pluta pragrihya achinityam. But this particular sutram has the words called pluta and pragrihya. So we need to first understand what is pluta and what is pragrihya. So we have 2 sutras that talk about the pluta. Then we have two sutras that talk about Pragriya, and then we will come to the actual sutram of Prakriti Bhava, that is Pluta Pragriya Achinityam. So with this introduction, प्रारभामहे. प्रारंभे प्रकृति भावः इत्यस्य विषये काचित् पीठिका अस्माभिः द्रष्टव्या वर्तते. प्रकृति भावः इत्युक्ते किं? संहितायाः विवक्षायाम् अपि संधेः साक्षात् कृतः निषेधः संधिः न भवति इति विशेषरूपेण ज्ञापनम्. So the word prakriti bhavaha asya nirmanam katham jatam? Prakritihi ityukte moola roopam, the original word that exists as it is, and bhavaha ityukte satta, to exist. Saha shabdaha yaha moola roope eva tishtati, sandhihi tatra na bhavati, kimapi parivartanam na bhavati, tadrishasya प्रकारस्य प्रयोगस्य निर्देशार्थम अत्र प्रकृति भावः इति शब्दः प्रयुक्तः अस्ति. अत्र कः विशेषः? यद्यपि संधिः न भवति तथापि संहिता अस्ति एव. यतोहि संहिता नास्ति चेत् संधेः चिन्तनमेव अनुचितं. संहिता अस्ति, संहितायाः विवक्षा अस्ति, तत्रापि संधिः न भवति. परन्तु संहितायाः विवक्षायां संधेः अभावे अपि द्वयोः शब्दयोः उच्चारणं विना विरामम् एव करणीयम्. So there is no sandhi doesn't mean you just speak them separately. You have to speak them together, but still you don't do sandhi. So here is a simple example. I'm not going to teach this in the course, but I'm just giving you an example. Very well known word called Brahmarshi. It is generated by Brahma and Rishi. There is a sutram which says there might be a Prakriti Bhava over here. I'm not going to teach the sutra because it is just an optional Prakriti Bhava, but it says there will be a Prakriti Bhava over here. So when there is a Prakriti Bhava, Brahma, Rishi, between these two words, you still speak them together like Brahma Rishi or Brahma Rishi, whichever it is. It can be Brahma or Brahma, either way. So Brahma Rishi. And if you do not have a Prakriti Bhava, you say Brahma Rishi. In both the cases, there will be samhita, so you cannot keep a pause between Brahma and Rishi. You have to speak them together. The only difference is whether you want to do the sandhi or not. Coming back to Prakriti Bhavaha kevalam ach sandhishu eva vidyate. हल संधि कार्ये, विसर्ग संधि कार्ये, स्वादि संधि कार्ये प्रकृति भावस्य कल्पना संकल्पना न वर्तते. So if there is a samhita and if there is a sutra that mandates hal sandhi or visarga sandhi or swadi sandhi, you have to quietly do it. Only in case of ach sandhi, you might think whether a sandhi is being blocked by prakriti bhava sutras. And this prakaranam, as I mentioned, Ashtadhyayi prakriti bhava prakaranam 61115 prakrutyantah padamavyapare ityatah 61128 rutyakah iti yavat asti. अस्मिन् प्रकरणे यानि सर्वाणि सूत्राणि विद्यन्ते तेभ्यः केवलं षट् सूत्राणि एव लौकिकसंस्कृतस्य सन्दर्भेण प्रकृतिभावं विदधति. अवशिष्टानि यानि कानि 8 सूत्रास् whatever are the remaining, so अवशिष्टानि 8 सूत्राणि वैदिकप्रयोगाणां सन्दर्भेण प्रकृतिभावस्य नियमान् ज्ञापयन्ति. And as I mentioned, the most important sutram of this particular prakaranam, pluta pragriyaha achi nityam. Kaha arthaha? Plutaswaraha nochet pragrihya samyaka shabdaha. A specific type of word is called pragrihya. We are going to learn about that. So pragrihya samyakaha shabdaha nochet plutaswaraha achi ityukte achvarne pare nityam प्रकृत्या एव तिष्ठन्ति तेषु किमपि परिवर्तनं न भवति. So if you have a pluta samyaka swara or if you have a pragruya samyaka shabda, pragruya is a term for a shabda, sometimes it is also for a varna, I'll talk about it later. Pluta is obviously a term for a swara. So pluta swaraha nochet pragruya samyakaha shabdaha अच्छवर्णे परे प्रकृत्या एव तिष्ठति तत्र किमपि परिवर्तनं न भवति इति अस्य सूत्रस्य आशयः. So now what we are going to do is we are going to spend some time in understanding a detailed summary or ask some detailed aspects of the pluta swara. Then we will go to the pragrihya shabda, learn a little about the pragrihya samya, and towards the end we are going to talk about this pluta pragrihya achinityam sutra. So let's start. Pluta swaraha. Some of the things are very obvious. You already know these. Plutaha iti swaranam kalakritaha bhedaha trimatrikaha swaraha plutaha iti namna jnayate एकमात्रो भवेद्ध्रस्वः द्विमात्रो दीर्घ उच्यते त्रिमात्रस्तु प्लुतो ज्ञेयः व्यञ्जनं त्वर्थमात्रिकम् सर्वेषां स्वराणां प्लुतभेदः अवश्यं वर्तते केचन स्वराः सन्ति येषां ह्रस्वभेदः नास्ति कश्चन स्वरः वर्तते यस्य दीर्घभेदः नास्ति परन्तु प्लुतभेदस्य विषये सर्वेषामपि स्वराणां प्लुतभेदः अवश्यं वर्तते. Now this is what you all know. The next important thing which you might not know is that unlike the hraswa and dirgha swaras, प्लुतस्वरयुक्ताः शब्दाः भाषायां प्रकृतरूपेण न दृश्यन्ते. So if you take a simple word like nadi, there is an akara which is naturally hraswa and there is an ikara which is naturally dirgha. So there are akaras, ikaras, hraswa, dirgha swaras that are naturally present in the language. Whereas when it comes to the pluta swara, there is no pluta swara words with pluta swara that are naturally present in the language. There are no pratyayas that include pluta swaras, like a pratyaya with the pluta swara is attached to the prakriti. Therefore, there is a word that is created which contains a pluta swara in it. There is nothing like that. प्लुतस्वरयुक्ताः शब्दाः भाषायां प्रकृतरूपेण इत्युक्ते मूलरूपेण ओरिजिनली just by combining prakriti plus pratyaya you don't get a pluta swara relate yukta word. So then what happens? विशिष्टेषु स्थलेषु ह्रस्वदी स्वरस्य दीर्घस्वरस्य च आदेशरूपेण प्लुतस्वरस्य विधानं भवति. So there are sutras in Ashtadhyayi that will say ह्रस्वस्वरस्य प्लुत आदेशः भवति, दीर्घस्वरस्य प्लुत आदेशः भवति, and these sutras are present in 8.2 प्लुतस्वर विधायकानि सूत्राणि. If you go to Ashtadhyayi 8.2.82 वाक्यस्य टेहे प्लुतः उदात्तः, this is an adhikara. It is in 8.2. In this adhikara all these sutras are collected which will convert an existing hraswa swara or an existing dirgha swara to pluta. So itah param, this is an adhikara. Itah param asya padasya antimam sutra paryantam, starting from 8 to 82 up to 8 to 108. The last sutra is 108. So itah param asya padasya antimam sutra paryantam nirdishteshu sandarbheshu vakyasya ti samyakah. So whatever vakya is there, तस्य टी सम्यकः. टी सम्यकः इत्युक्ते वाक्यस्य यः अन्तिमः शब्दः तस्य अन्तिम स्वरात् आरभ्य अग्रे विद्यमानः अंशः. सो वाक्यस्य टी सम्यकः प्लुतः भवति and उदात्तः भवति. So the same swara is simultaneously being converted into the udatta form and into the pluta form. This is the entire section and this is the only section of Ashtadhyayi starting from 8 to 82 up to 8 to 108. 108 is where the adhikara ends. So till before that, so 107 is the last sutra in the adhikara. So starting from 8 to 82 up to 8 to 107, in this entire adhikara, the pluta conversion, the rasva to pluta or dirgha to pluta conversion happens. So plutaswara vidhayakani sutrani vakyasya tehe plutah udattah ityasmin adhikare vartante. अस्य अधिकारस्य व्याप्ति 8 to 82 इत्यस्मात् आरभ्य पादस्य परिसमाप्ति पर्यन्तं वर्तते. अस्य अधिकारस्य केवलं 4 एव सूत्राणि लौकिक संस्कृते प्लुतस्वरस्य विधानं कुर्वन्ति. This is not a surprising thing. Plutaswara is mainly used in Vedic recitations. So most of the sutras in that entire section, in fact, if you go to this entire sequence, vakyasya tehe plutah udattah is the adhikara. Start counting from that. प्रत्यये भिवादे अशूद्रे दूराद्धुते च हैहे प्रयोगे हैहयोः and गुरोरनृतो अनन्तस्याप्येकैकस्य प्राचाम. Only these 4 sutras in sequence placed all the way in the beginning, these are the ones that will give the pluta adesha in the laukika samskritam. Starting from the next sutram om abhyadane and so on, everything else till end of the adhikara is all purely Vedic context. Therefore, kevalam chatvari eva sutrani laukika samskrute plutaswarasya vidhanam kurvanti avashishtani ekavimshatih sutrani Vedika samskrutasya sandarbhena plutaswarasya vidhanam kurvanti. Now, there is a very interesting aspect, and I'm going to talk about it in details towards the end of the class, not towards the end, somewhere in the middle. But understand that there are so many sutras that give a pluta adesha. There is a siddhanta in the Vyakarana Shastra which says, Vakyasya tehe plutaha udattaha asya adhikarasya sarvani api sutrani vikalpena pluta vidhanam kurvanti. Now, this is very important because if you go to this particular sutram, Vakyasya tehe plutaha udattaha pratyabhivadeshu ashudre dura dhutecha and so on, you will not see a word like va, anyatarasyam, vibhasha and so on. Purely by looking at the sutras, it is absolutely not possible to say that whatever this pluta and udatta conversion is being done is optional. There is no hint in the sutras. However, there is a siddhanta in the Vyakarana Shastra which says sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate. All the conversion from Hrasva to Pluta or Dirgha to Pluta is completely optional. Now, why is this Siddhanta created and how do we justify it? Because you cannot randomly create Siddhantas like this. All that it's a little Shastra Vishaya, all that I'm going to teach about say 20-25 minutes from now. This is just an introduction that Asmin Adhikare Vidyamanani Sarvani Api Sutrani Vikalpena Eva Pluta Vidhanam Kurvanti. Now let's come to the topic. We are talking about ach sandhis. The fundamental sutra is pluta pragryaha achinityam. What does it mean? If you have a pluta swara, let's take a hypothetical case. You have a word called Rama and the akara at the end of Rama is pluta. I'm writing it at the lower part of the screen. So Rama. And if I say add a swara next to it, say atra, then in general Rama plus atra might become Ramatra. But when there is a pluta swara over there, pluta pragryaha achinityam. So there is no ach sandhi happening. There is a prakriti bhava happening, which means that Rama cannot undergo a sandhi with akara of atra because there is a prakriti bhava. However, this fundamental question of asking whether a sandhi will happen is itself questionable. Why it is questionable? Understand this. This is something very important. Plutaswara vidhayakani sarvani sutrani tripadyam santi. The sutras are in 8.2 onwards. They are in tripadi, which means they are asiddha towards the ach sandhi sutras, which are in 6.1. The ekadesha and purvadesha. These sutras that we have studied in the last two classes, they are all in 6.1. So, plutaswara idha vidhayakani sarvani sutrani tripadyameva santi ityukte etaihi swaraihi nirmitaha plutaswaraha sapada saptadhyayaha sutranam sandarbhena asiddhaha eva asti. Which means that even if you have say Rama, I'm not writing, even if you have say Rama and there is a pluta swara at the end Rama, who is going to see that pluta swara? Only the sutras in 8.3 and 8.4 are going to see that pluta swara. Before that, entire Sapada Saptadhyayi, you cannot see that pluta swara. You can only see the Hrasva swara or the Dirgha swara, is what the fundamental rule of Asiddhatva tells us. So, plutaswara vidhayakani sarvani sutrani tripadyam santi etaihi sutraihi nirmitaha plutaswaraha sapada saptadhyayah sutranam sandarbhena asiddhaha asti. What it means is that sutra pluta pragrya achinityam seems useless. At least the pluta part of that sutra is useless. Because when you say Rama with atra, while doing the ach sandhi, the ach sandhi prakarana sutra, which is in 6.1, cannot see a pluta at all. It will see a haswa and then it will automatically do the sandhi saying ramatra. There is no question of a visibility of pluta swara. So the fundamental word called pluta in pluta pragriya achinityam seems rather useless. And that's where something interesting aspect comes up. So understand this point. अच् संधि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणि अपि सपाद सप्ताध्याय्याम् एव विद्यन्ते. अच् संधि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणां कृते वस्तुतः प्लुतस्वरस्य असिद्धत्वं संभवति. If you just go by the normal Tripadi rules, then ach sandhi prakarana sutras will not know the existence of pluta. However, something else also operates. Ach sandhi karyartham plutaswaraha siddhaha eva asti. The reality is that the plutaswara is visible for the sutras of ach sandhi prakaranam. Why? Because there is a very interesting concept called Antaranga bahiranga that operates over here. Understand this point. These are the two words, Antaranga and Bahiranga. I have just briefly mentioned these when we were talking about the interaction between the sutras. Sutreshu vidyamanaha paraspara sambandhaha panchavidhaha. I have explained this. One was Utsarga Apavada, which we have studied in details. Other was Purva Para or Vipratishedha, which we have studied in details. Third was Siddha Asiddhatva. We have studied that in details. And there were two more which I said we will not study. One of them was Nitya Anitya and the other was Antaranga Bahiranga. That's what is coming up over here. So what is Antaranga and what is Bahiranga? Antaranga is a karya that happens inside a single word. एकस्य शब्दस्य कार्यं नो चेत् एकस्मिन् शब्दे विद्यमानं कार्यम् अन्तरङ्गं नाम्ना ज्ञायते. शब्दद्वयस्य मध्ये विद्यमानं कार्यं बहिरङ्गं नाम्ना ज्ञायते. See the words themselves. Antaranga, internal. Bahiranga, external. Any karya that happens inside a word is called Antaranga. Any karya that happens between the two words is called Bahiranga. So Bahiranga karyam, Shabdadvayasya madhye vidyamanam karyam, Antaranga karyam, Ekasmin shabde vidyamanam karyam. So if you look at the comparison between the ach sandhi and the plutaswara adesha, the plutaswara nirmana karyam, so the raswa getting converted to pluta, that particular karyam is antaranga karyam. It is the swara of Rama itself which is getting converted to pluta. So it is an antaranga karyam. Whereas the ach sandhi karyam is the karyam between the two words. There is a separate word called Rama and separate word called Atra, and the makara of Rama is under, or makarottara akara of Rama is undergoing an ach sandhi with akara of Atra. So ach sandhi in this particular context is a bahiranga karya. Ach sandhi can also happen antaranga separately. So for example, in case of nai plus aka, which gives you nayaka, ach sandhi is also antaranga karya. But here pluta is not coming in the picture. Pluta happens only for a swara of a word. So after that, when ach sandhi karya is being discussed, that is always with a different word, and therefore that ach sandhi karya which is coming in the context of the pluta swara is always bahiranga. So in this particular discussion, the pluta swara nirmana karyam which is present in Tripadi is antaranga, and ach sandhi karyam which is happening between the two words is bahiranga. So ach sandhi karyam plutaswarasya vidhanasya apekshaya bahirangam asti, plutaswara vidhana karyam tu antarangam asti. And with this background, there is a very, very important rule in Vyakarana Shastra which says bahiranga karyasya apekshaya antaranga karyam pradhanyena bhavati. You first solve issues in your house and then you go to the neighbor's house to solve the issues. सो बहिरंग कार्यस्य अपेक्षया अंतरंग कार्यं प्राधान्येन भवति इत्यर्थका काचिद् व्याकरण परिभाषा वर्तते. So there is this Vyakarana Paribhasha. The exact wording is slightly different. We will not go into details. But the essence is that this Paribhasha says, wrap up the things in your own word first and then talk about external. So the Antaranga Karya first has to be done. Asyaha Paribhashayaha Samarthyat Adau Tripadyaha Sutraihi Plutah Adeshaha Karaniyaha. And then that Antaranga Karya, a second part of this paribhasha says that it will be visible to the bahiranga karya. So antaranga karya is always visible to the bahiranga karya. The tripadi sapada sabdhade boundaries don't matter, and therefore asyaha paribhashayaha samarthyat adau tripadyaha sutraihi pluta adeshaha karaniyaha तदनंतरम अग्रे अन्येन शब्देन सह अच संधि कार्यम करणीयम. So here is an example. Tatra and ekadanta. I want to do the ach sandhi on these two words. But before that, let's finish up the antaranga karya. So asyam avasthayam adau tripadi sutrena ekarasya pluta adeshaha bhavati. I'm going to teach the sutra in a while, but once you know the sutra, you will see that there is an pluta adesha on the ekara. So tatra ekadanta. In this particular configuration, now you can do vruddhi rechi and say tatraikadanta. So you can actually do ach sandhi like this. If you have a ach letter, if you have an akara and a pluta swara, first you do the creation of pluta swara and then you do the ach sandhi. Remember, pluta pragrya achinityam does not play any role over here because pluta pragrya achinityam, it is only paranimitta that is being blocked. If the pluta is coming later and ach is coming earlier, it is not pluta pragryaha achaha nityam. So ach varnaha purvam asti, pluta varnaha paraha asti ched avashyam sandhi bhavati. Where it is being blocked by prakriti bhava, if the pluta is earlier and ach is a paranimitta. So Rama plus Atra Ityasyam Avasthayam. There is a sutram which will cause the Pluta Adesha on Makarottara Akara. So Rama plus Atra Iti Sthite. इदानीं शब्दद्वयस्य मध्ये अकस्सवर्णे दीर्घा इत्यनेन या सवर्णदीर्घैकादेशः प्राप्नोति तस्य प्लुत प्रगृह्य अचिनित्यम इत्यनेन बाधः भवति. So in this particular case, the pluta swara will not undergo a sandhi with an upcoming ach letter, which is the paranimitta. But in case of tatra plus ekadanta, vruddhi rechi will definitely do vruddhi ekadesha. Again, typing mistake. Not vruddhi ekadesha, vruddhi ekadesha. Vruddhi ekadesha. Somebody pointed in the last class. I forgot fixing over here. So vruddhi ekadeshe krute tatraikadanta iti atra antimam rupam avashyam siddhyati. Any questions so far? Purnima Bhagini.
Namaste Mohdaya. Is there any specific reason that sutra is in Tripadi?
Correct. That's a good question.
But,
So this correct. So sutra is in Tripadi because it is in general asiddha towards all other sutras of Sapada Saptadhyayi. Only when there is this specific situation of Antaranga Bahiranga, that particular paribhasha will override it. That is specifically between two words and only related to ach sandhi. But otherwise, the reason why Pluta Swara is in Tripadi is because it is asiddha towards everybody else in Sapada Saptadhyayi. What it means is that if there is a sutram in Sapada Saptadhyayi which says Raswanta Shabdaha asti chet ayam pratyaya vidhiyate. So pratyaya is being added when it is a Raswanta word. So Raswanta Shabda se ayam pratyaya. So that is again Antaranga itself. That is a karya within a word. So then such karyas are definitely going to be coming first. The Pluta is asiddha towards them. Yeah? Ratnakar Mahoday.
Namaste Acharya. Shruyate mama dhvani.
Sure.
The thing is, Acharya, tatra ekadanta. Why ye is in pluta form, Acharya. There are
Correct.
normally we don't find that sort of a thing.
Correct. I'll talk about it. There is a sutram, we are going to learn that. So you will understand.
And because it is in pluta form, there the sandhis a plus a in pluta form. That's
Correct.
what you said. That is fine.
Correct. You will see the sutra. I'll talk about it in a while. Astu. Agre gacchamaha. So now let's talk about the sutras that actually give the pluta. There are 4 sutras, as I mentioned. Only in the Laukika Sutram, there are 4 sutras. I'm going to not talk about this Pratyabhivadre, Ashudre. So this sutram I'm not going to talk. Dura Dhutecha is what we are going to learn. And Guru Randruto Anantasya Ekaikasya Pracham. This is a sutram that we are going to learn. So we are going to learn this sutra number 84 and sutra number 86. Again, 85 I am not going to teach, but the sutra is so simple, that 85 number, so simple that I am just going to give you one line meaning of that sutra. It's not being counted in the list of sutras that we are counting. I'm just going to give you one line meaning of this middle. Hai he prayoge, hai hai yoho. But let's talk about the main 2 sutras, Dura Dhutecha and Guru Randruto. So actually both the sutras are very simple. The first sutram is Durat Dhutecha. It is actually Durat Hutecha. Durat Sambodhane Yad Vakyam Tasya Tehe Plutaha Syat. So the Padacheda is Durad Hutecha. Vakyasya Tehe Plutaha Udattaha is the Adhikara. So Durad Hute Vakyasya Tehe Plutaha Udattaha. Durat means anavasthitat, far distance, not closer. Say a few feet, or say some like from one room to another room and so on. So Durat, obviously Dura and Nikat are always relative, but like when you have to loudly call, iti atra ashayah asti. Durad hute. Hute ityukte avhane krute. You call somebody. Sambodhane krute. And hute, the word by word meaning is avhane krute. Vhe iti dhatu asti. So avhane krute doesn't necessarily mean call towards you. So even though the word is hute, whose verbatim translation is to call towards you, but the word is used in the sutram not to indicate calling towards you, but simply sambodhanartham ayam shabda atra prayukta asti. So hutagrahanam sambodhana matra upalakshanartham. So huta, even though literal meaning is avhanam, to call to yourself, to call towards yourself, in this sutram the word huta, which is vedhatu plus ta pratyaya, is being used to indicate just calling, not necessarily to yourself, towards yourself. So sambodhanartham eva drashtavyam tena yatrapi ahvanam nasti. So if you're calling, that is also fine, but if you're not calling towards yourself, just telling from some far distance, that is also acceptable. Tatra api plutir bhavati. So duradhute vakyasya tehe plutaha udattaha kaha arthaha दूरात् संबोधनम कर्तुम यद वाक्यम उच्चार्यते तस्य टिसम्यकः प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति. It is a single sutram that gives pluta and udatta. We are not going to talk about udatta at all in this class. So let us focus on pluta going ahead. So durat sambodhanam kartum yad vakyam ucchariyate tasya ti samyakah plutah bhavati. What is ti? Achontyadi titerena shabdasya antima swarat arabhya antima varna paryantam vidyamanaha amshaha ti samyakah asti. And ti samyakah plutah bhavati means what? It is only the swara that can be pluta and udatta. So ti samyakaha plutaha udattaha bhavati ityukte ti samyakasya swaraha plutaha udattaha cha bhavati. So when you are using a sentence to call somebody loudly from some distance, whichever is the last word of that sentence, tasya yaha ti samyakaha saha swaraha atra anena sutrena plutaha udattaha cha vidhiyate. So some simple examples. Agachha bho Vishnu Sharman. Vishnu Sharma is somewhere in other room or a little distance away, and you are calling him. Agachha bho Vishnu Sharman. Iti vakyam yadi Vishnu Sharmanah apekshaya duraduccharyate. Tarhi asya vakyasya tisamyakasya swaraha. Ityukte Vishnu Sharman shabdasya antimah swaraha. Ityukte makarottaraha akaraha. Sharma. That akara प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति. So agaccha bho Vishnu Sharman. This is how you can call it. Similarly, Kshiram Piba Devadatta. Now, this is not Avhanam, this is not calling. It is just Sambodhanam. So, mother is at one end, the kid is at another, and maybe the milk is near the kid. So, mother is just shouting from one end, please drink that milk. So, Kshiram Piba Devadatta. It is just Sambodhana, not necessarily Avhanam. So, Kshiram Piba Devadatta. Iti Vakyam Yadi Devadattasya Apekshaya Duraducharyate. So Kshira and Devadatta might be next to each other, but the speaker is at a distance. So Devadattस्य अपेक्षया दूरादुच्चार्यते तर्हि अस्य वाक्यस्य टिसंज्ञकस्य स्वरः इत्युक्ते देवदत्त शब्दस्य अन्तिमः अकारः प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति क्षीरं पिब देवदत्ता. Third example, palayasva gargi. Very specific example because the word gargi is dirgha ikaranta, sambodhana ekvachane tasya hrasva ikaradesha bhavati. So gargi. So palayasva gargi. इति वाक्यम यदि गार्ग्याः अपेक्षया दूरादुच्चार्यते तर्हि अस्य वाक्यस्य टिसंज्ञकस्य स्वरः इत्युक्ते गार्गी इति ह्रस्वान्त शब्दस्य अन्तिमः ह्रस्व इकारः प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति पलायस्व गार्गी इति तस्य उच्चारणं करणीयम्. Finally, example that includes a visarga. So odanam bhungdhvam manavakaha. Manavaka means kids. So hey kids, eat the rice. ओदनम भुंध्वम माणवकाः इति वाक्यम यदि माणवकानाम अपेक्षया दूरादुच्चार्यते तर्हि अस्य वाक्यस्य टिसंज्ञकः स्वरः इत्युक्ते माणवकाः नॉट ब माणवकाः इति शब्दस्य अन्तिमः आकारः प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति ओदनम भुंध्वम माणवकाः. In this way, in these all examples, it will be clear that whatever sentence is being used for invoking, for addressing somebody from the distance, tasya vakyasya antima shabdasya yaha antimah swaraha saha udattaha plutaha cha bhavati. Now there are some corner cases which are only understood from the commentaries. There are no direct indications from the sutra patha, parantu vyakhyanato vishesha pratipattir iti niyamat atra etesham jnanam bhavati. So idam avadheyam. Prakruta sutrasya prayogaha tada eva bhavati yada vakyasya antimaha shabdaha sambodhana vachaka padam asti. So the name that is being called, the sambodhana has to be at the end. So anyeshu sthaleshu atra prayogaha asya sutrasya na bhavati. So instead of saying agaccha devadatta, if you say devadatta agaccha, if you are using the verb at the end, agaccha iti shabdah ante sthapyate, tarhi yadyapi atra duradavhanam krutamasti, tathapi prakruta sutrasya atra prayogaha na bhavati. And this is clear only from the vyakhyanas. So Kashikakara says, durad avhane वाक्यस्य अन्ते यत्र संबोधनं पदं भवति तत्र अयं प्लुतः इष्यते तेन इह न भवति देवदत्त आगच्छ. So Devadatta agaccha will not have the current sutra invoked, but agaccha Devadatta will have the current sutra invoked. So that's the important clause that you learn from the commentaries. And then the next rule, which is actually the next sutram, hai hai prayoge hai hayoho. There is this sutram immediately after duradhutecha. There is this sutram hai hai prayoge hai hayoho. This is the sutram that I am teaching. This is the sutra I said that I will not teach. I'll just mention the meaning of this sutram in one line. So the meaning of the sutra is that yadi vakye sambodhana vachakasya padasya yoge he nochet hai iti avyam vidyate. He is very common. You say Hey Rama, Hey Krishna, Hey Gargi. Hai can also be used in the same way. Hai Rama, Hai Krishna, and so on. So yadi vakye sambodhana vachakasya padasya yoge he nochet hai iti avyam vidyate tarhi asyam sthitau he nochet hai ityasya swaraha eva plutaha bhavati sambodhana vachakasya ti pada samnyakasya swaraha plutaha na bhavati. So if you go back and see all the previous examples, in none of these examples he or hai was used. Bho was used. So you can use bho, you can use aho, you can use are, or you can ignore completely. That's all acceptable. परंतु हे नो चेत् है इति शब्दः वाक्ये मा भूत्। यदि वाक्ये हे नो चेत् है इति शब्दः स्यात्, यथा सक्तून् पिब हे देवदत्त, अस्यां स्थितौ हे इति शब्दस्य एकारः एव प्लुतः भवति। सो सक्तून् पिब हे देवदत्त, if you just have the sentence Saktun Piba Devadatta, then the previous rule will apply and you can say Saktun Piba Devadatta. But when there is he word sitting in between, it is only the ekar of he or hai, whichever word is there. Tasya eva pluta adeshaha bhavati. So Saktun Piba he Devadatta. So hai he prayoge duradhute yad vakyam vartate तत्र है हयोः इत्युक्ते है नो चेत् हे इत्यस्य एव प्लुतः भवति। हे देवदत्त इति अत्र उदाहरणं दीयते। So that's all about duradhute cha. We completed one sutra, duradhute cha. The next sutram is again for the pluta samyaka only. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to talk about pratyabhivade ashudre. We finished duradhute cha and we also finished, I just quickly explained hai he prayoge hai hayoho. Now the next sutram, gurorandruto anantasyapi ekaikasya pracham. Before that, any questions? I can take them. Ratnakar Mahoday.
Acharya, 3 questions. Sorry. First one, in that Vishnu Sharman, there Bho is also like He or Hai, but still it is not Pluta one. Is that so?
Correct. As I mentioned, only the words He and Hai are the ones that have special handling.
Second thing, despite being Vyanjana is there after Vishnu Sharman, Makarottara Akara is still a Pluta only.
Because it is T Samyaka. The T Samyaka is Antima Swarat Arabhya Agre Vidyamanam Yat Kimapi Asti. See, the Sutra says Te He Pluta Udatta. So you have to look at which is the T Samyaka in the word and make that Pluta.
So all these days I was under the impression that only if only Ach is there, Swara is there, that only becomes Pluta in the end. But
No,
still there is Vyanjana.
Even in the Vishnu Sharma,
that's
the T Samyaka is Akara, so that will become Pluta.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it, Ajahn. Thank you.
Any other questions? Gachamaha. The next sutram is pretty long. It's very easy, but unnecessarily long. So instead of like doing the padacheda or pada by pada explanation, I'm just going to go and explain you the meaning of the sutram. So Guroranruto Anantasya Pyekaikasya Pracham. Just listen to the meaning and then we will do all the padacheda and so on. Duradhute Yad Vakyam. So whichever vakyas, all we examples we took, Kshiram Piba Devadatta and so on. Duradhute Yad Vakyam तस्य रुद्भिन्नस्य अनन्तस्य अपि एकैकस्य गुरोः वा प्लुतः स्यात्. What this entire sutra means, and all this information is actually encoded in the sutra itself. Guroho Anrutoho Anantasya api ekaikasya pracham. So very lengthy sutram. All that it says is that whatever examples we are talking about in this particular prakaranam, like Shiram Pima Devadatta, Palaya Swagargi, and so on. So asmin prakarane yasya shabdasya ti samyakasya. So first you have a sentence. Then you look at the last word of that sentence. And then you look at the ti samyaka on that last word. So yasya shabdasya ti samyakasya plutatvam udatvam cha uktamasti. तस्य एव शब्दस्य अन्यः रुकार भिन्नः गुरुस्वरः. Pick up any guru swara in that particular word which is not rukara. So rukara भिन्नः गुरुस्वरः vikalpena plutah udattah cha bhavati. So you, instead of taking that last T samyaka which is guaranteed to be pluta by the previous sutram, what you take is you take any other swara in that word, not the sentence, just that last word of the sentence. So you have a sentence like Agacha Devadatta and so on. You look at the last word, which is a Sambodhana Vachaka word. The T Samyaka of that word has already been made Pluta by the previous sutram. Now you pick up any other swara in that word. The only condition is it should be guru samyaka. So Raswam Laghu Sanyoge Guru Dirgham cha. So Guru Samyaka, and it cannot be Rukara. So Rukara Bhinnaha Guru Swaraha Vikalpena Plutaha Udattaha cha Bhavati. And then the sutra adds another clause, ekasmin samaye ekasya eva swarasya pluta samya udatta samya cha vidhiyate. So you either take that T samyaka by the previous sutram and make it pluta and udatta, or you come to this sutram and find other some swaras which are which are guru and which are not rukara, and you make one of them pluta. So you have multiple choices, परंतु एकस्मिन् समये एकस्य एव स्वरस्य प्लुत संज्ञा उदात्त संज्ञा च विधीयते. So kshiram piba devadatta. So that akara was made pluta by the previous sutra. Ityatra devadatta shabdasya अन्ये गुरु सम्यक स्वराः अपि विकल्पेन ekaikam. Ekaikam means in place of that last. So that last T samyaka is not going to remain pluta anymore. If you are applying this sutram, you cannot apply two sutras simultaneously, the previous one and this one. So you either apply the previous one and make the T samyaka, which is pluta, as a pluta, or you apply the current sutra, do not make that T samyaka as pluta, and pick up any other non-rukara guru swara and make it pluta. So devadatta shabdasya अन्ये guru samyaka swaraha api vikalpena ekaikam plutaha udattaha cha bhavanti. So devadatta has an ekara which is a guru swara. So you can say kshiram piba devadatta, or the dakarottara akara of devadatta, even though it is raswa, because there is a sanyoga after it, it becomes a guru, sanyoge guru. So you can still make that pluta and say kshiram piba devadatta. Sounds very weird, but kshiram piba devadatta. So this way you can make even that swara as pluta. वकारोत्तरः अकारः देवदत्त इत्यत्र विद्यमानः वकारोत्तरः अकारः गुरुसम्यकः नास्ति, अतः तस्य अत्र प्लुत आदेशः उदात्त आदेशः च न भवति. Another example, आगच्छ अत्र महाकृष्ण वर्तमान. So that man is because of the previous sutram. वाक्यस्य टेः प्लुतः उदात्तः दूराद्भुते च इत्यनेन अत्र मकारोत्तरः अकारः प्लुतः विधीयते. परंतु अत्र महाकृष्ण वर्तमान इति शब्दस्य अन्ये ऋकार भिन्नाः गुरुस्वराः अपि विकल्पेन एकैकं प्लुताः उदात्ताः च भवन्ति. सो महा इत्यत्र हकारोत्तर आकारः गुरुस्वरः अस्ति, सः प्लुत सम्यकः भवितुमर्हति. नो चेत् कृष्ण वर्तमन् इत्यत्र वकारोत्तरः अकारः ह्रस्वस्वरः अस्ति, परन्तु अग्रे संयोगः अस्ति, अतः सः गुरुसंज्ञां प्राप्नोति, तस्य अपि अत्र प्लुतादेशः भवितुम् अर्हति. एंड ककारोत्तः ऋकारः अपि गुरुसम्यकः एव अस्ति, अग्रे संयोगः विद्यते, परन्तु अस्य स्वरस्य साक्षात् सूत्रे निषेधः कृतः अस्ति, अतः ककारोत्तरः ऋकारः गुरुसम्यकः सन् अपि उदात्तः नो चेत् प्लुतः न भवति. There is a direct nishedha in the sutram. Now I am going to walk you through the padacheda so that you will understand. But the rule says that other than rukara, any guru samyaka swara one by one can be pluta. That is the reason why that ekara of ekadanta was pluta in that particular example, because it is a guru swara. It is present in the last word of that particular sentence, and then it is possible to make it guru. It is not rukara, so it is possible to make it pluta by this particular sutra. Now with this background, let's now go to the previous slide and understand the padacheda, anuvrutti and so on. Now it will be very easy. Guroho ityukte guru samyakasya. कीदृशः गुरु सम्यकः? अनृतोः इत्युक्ते न ऋतोः इत्युक्ते ऋकार भिन्नस्य गुरु सम्यकस्य. सो यः गुरु सम्यकः ऋकार भिन्नः नास्ति, अनन्त्यस्य. सो अन्त्य इज ऑलरेडी टेकन केयर इन द प्रीवियस सूत्रम. सो अनन्त्यस्य, सो अन्ते यः विद्यमानः नास्ति, अन्त्य भिन्नः यः अस्ति, तस्य अपि also. Api means basically connecting the same concept. So in the previous sutram, antyasya plutadesha abhavat. Asmin sutre anantyasya api plutadesha jatah. Api ekaikasya. एकस्मिन् समये एकस्य एव प्लुतादेशः भवति प्राच्याम् इत्युक्ते पूर्वदिशि विद्यमानानाम् आचार्याणां मतेन. So this is a place in Ashtadhyayi where Panini Maharshi is being all inclusive. He's saying that language has different flavors in the different parts of the Aryavarta, and therefore this is a typical opinion that prevails in the community of the Eastern grammarians. So पूर्वदिशि विद्यमानाः ये आचार्याः तेषां mateena, in the dialect of their language, what they are doing, they are allowing the pluta adesha on a non-rukara guru samyaka word of the last non-rukara guru samyaka swara of the last word of the sentence. So that whole information is being captured. Guroho anrutoho rukara bhinnasya guru samyakasya anantyasya yaha antena vidyate tasya api ekaikasya one by one pracham acharyanam matena. And what does Panini mean when he says pracham? He is not saying that those Eastern grammarians have their own dialect and I don't agree with them. Words like pracham or udicham and so on are basically to indicate a dialect of the language, which means that this karya is optional. A dialect always gives one version which is used in some part of the country but not in the other part of the country, which essentially means it is optional conversion. So pracham iti kevalam upalakshanartham. It is only an indicatory. It is fundamentally used to indicate vikalpa. So vikalpena ityashaya. There is no hard and fast vertical boundary that beyond this boundary, whatever acharyas are there, they must agree to this. And to the left of the boundary, acharyas cannot agree to this. It is not like that. So kevalam prakshu ityate purvadeshi vidyamanaha acharyaha एव इत्थं मन्यते इति किमपि नास्ति. केवलम् अत्र सामान्य रूपेण a majority has been discussed, परन्तु अत्र विकल्पेन एतादृशं भवति इति अत्र आशयः वर्तते. सो अस्मिन् प्रकरणे यस्य शब्दस्य टिसंज्ञकस्य प्लुतत्वम् उदात्त्वं च उदात्तत्वं च उक्तमस्ति, तस्य शब्दस्य अन्यः ऋकारभिन्नः गुरुस्वरः अपि विकल्पेन प्लुतः उदात्तः भवति. एकस्मिन् समये एकस्य एव स्वरस्य प्लुतसंज्ञा उदात्तसंज्ञा च विधीयते. Any questions so far? Because there is something else that I want to discuss. Okay. Now comes that interesting part where we say all pluta is optional. How is that Siddhanta being derived? So that Siddhanta is derived from this particular sutram. What Dikshita says in Siddhanta Kaumudi about this sutram is that iha pracham iti yogo vibhajyate tena sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate. So he is concluding all pluta is optional. But how is he concluding? He is giving some very technical statement, technical argument. Iha pracham iti yogo vibhajyate. Kaha arthaha? See this particular very brilliant concept. What Dikshita is saying, and Dikshita is not creating things on his own, he's basically saying what Bhashyakara and others have said, he's only echoing. He says that even though you see a sutram on the face of it as a single sutram, Guru Nandruto Nantasyapya Ekaikasya Pracham, technically what he's saying is that these are two sutras. So अस्मिन् सूत्रे विद्यमानः प्राच्याम् इति शब्दः पृथग् रूपेण नूतन सूत्र सदृशः स्वीकर्तव्यः. So essentially what looks like one sutram is basically a twin sutram. You break it apart, take the word pracham and put it next in the line and treat it as a next sutram, as a separate sutram. इत्युक्ते गुरोरनृतोऽनन्तस्याप्यैकैकस्य इति एकं सूत्रं pracham iti aparam. This particular technique, it is a very powerful technique, and when you will learn Ashtadhyayi more and more, you will see this kind of technique explored in various places in advanced commentaries. So this particular technique, where one sutra is broken down into two separate sutras, is called yoga vibhaga. एतादृशम् एकस्य सूत्रस्य विभाजनं कृत्वा द्वयोः सूत्रयोः निर्माणं योग विभागः नाम्ना ज्ञायते. योग means sutra. Yoga does not mean yoga asana and so on. In this particular case, yoga means sutram, vibhaga means vibhajanam. योगस्य कृतः विभागः, सूत्रस्य कृतं विभाजनम is called योग विभागः. Before I go ahead, let me tell you, you, me, other people cannot randomly decide to break sutras. You cannot just say adeng gunaha yoga vibhagam kurmaha. Adeng is one and guna is separate. This is to be done by shishtas, this is to be done by scholars, and yoga vibhaga, unless it is justified in the commentary with the reasoning, you cannot do yoga vibhaga like this. Second thing, yoga vibhaga is a concept. You are not going to reprint Ashtadhyayi books by creating Gurorandruto Anantasyapi Ekasya one sutram, Pracham, other sutram, then give 8 to 87 number through Pracham. You are not going to do anything like that. It is just a hypothetical concept. You mentally assume that Gurorandruto Anantasyapi Ekasya is say 86A and Pracham is 86B, something like that. But while counting the sutras, you don't count them separately. While chanting, you don't chant them separately. It is a specific theoretical concept introduced by the commentators to justify some prayogas. So, etadrisham ekasya sutras vibhajanam krutva dvayoho sutrayoho krutam nirmanam yoga vibhagaha namna jnayate. And the fundamental question over here is why you want to do such yoga vibhaga? The answer is अनेन योग विभागेन प्लुतस्य विकल्पः दर्शयितुं शक्यः. How is that possible? Pay close attention. When you break this sutram into two parts, the first sutram is now Gurorandrutonantasyapi ekaikasya. Only the pracham part is removed. It is now moving into next sutra. So the original sutra doesn't have pracham. So what the original sutra will mean, it will mean exactly what we have studied so far, except that the vikalpa part will be removed. So the newly created first sutra will now mean अस्मिन् प्रकरणे यस्य शब्दस्य टी सम्यकस्य प्लुतत्वम् उदात्तत्वं च उक्तमस्ति तस्य शब्दस्य अन्यः ऋकारभिन्नः गुरुस्वरः अपि, and then you don't use the word vikalpena because pracham is no more there. So guruswaraha api plutaha udattaha cha bhavati. So the newly created Gurorandrutonantasyapi ekaikasya, this sutram is now going to give the additional pluta swaras, one by one obviously, but still additional pluta swaras compulsorily. So prathamam sutram Gurorandrutonantasyapi ekaikasya asya kaha arthaha अस्मिन् प्रकरणे यस्य शब्दस्य टिसम्यकस्य प्लुतत्वम् उदात्तत्वं च उक्तमस्ति तस्य शब्दस्य अन्यः कश्चन ऋकारभिन्नः गुरुस्वरः अपि प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति. I have copied the exact meaning without the word vikalpena. So गुरुस्वरः अपि प्लुतः उदात्तः च भवति. अत्र विकल्पः न उक्तः इत्युक्ते अयम प्लुतादेशः नित्यं भवति इति अत्र आशयः. So you have to make one of them as pluta iti atra ashayah. And then the dvitiyam sutram pracham. Pracham means what? Optional. Purvadishi vidyamananam acharyanam matena means optional. So in this only sutram called pracham, you bring the anuvrutti of plutaha. So vakyasya tehe or you can entirely bring vakyasya tehe pluta udattaha. But fundamentally you bring the anuvrutti, what is required is plutaha. So you bring the anuvrutti of plutaha in this newly created sutram called pracham. So essentially the sutra will now be called Plutaha pracham. And the meaning of the word pracham is vikalpena. So then it would mean sarvaha plutaha vikalpena bhavati. So atra plutaha iti anuvartate in the pracham sutram. Atra plutaha iti anuvartate. Atah sampurnam sutram plutaha pracham iti bhavati. अस्य कः अर्थः अस्मिन् प्रकरणे उक्तः सर्वः प्लुतः स्वरः विकल्पेन एव भवति अष्टाध्याय्याः सर्वाणि प्लुतविधायकानि सूत्राणि वैकल्पिकानि एव ज्ञेयानि इति अत्र आशयः. That's exactly what is captured by Siddhanta Kaumudi in 2 sentences. इह प्राचाम इति योगो विभज्यते. इत्युक्ते take pracham as a separate sutram. तेन सर्वः प्लुतः विकल्प्यते. संपूर्ण प्लुतः विकल्प्यते because you take pracham as a separate sutram and bring the anuvrutti of plutah. Plutah pracham इत्युक्ते सर्वः प्लुतः विकल्प्यते. अनेन प्रकारेण अत्र अस्माभिः प्लुतस्वरस्य सूत्रद्वयस्य अध्ययनं कृतं गुरुदुराधुते च and गुरोरनृतोऽनन्तस्यापि एकैकस्य प्राचाम्. I know we are running out of time, but next sutras won't take time. Idude dvivachanam pragruhyam adasomat are the next 2 sutras that talk about pragruhya samya and then pluta pragruhya achinityam. I have already explained that particular sutram, so it won't take much time. Any questions about pluta? If not, I will move to pragruhya. Sudhavalli.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
Is this yoga vibhaga only for pluta or any sutra?
Yoga vibhaga is only for this given sutram Gurorandruto so Anantasya Gurorandruto.
Only this sutram or any other sutram in the Ashtadhyayi?
Oh, there are a few more sutras in the Ashtadhyayi that will give yoga vibhaga. So if you go to the Bhasha, you will see a few examples, but it's very rare. Like maybe 20, 25, maximum 30 sutras, not more than that.
My doubt is, actually that 2 sutras mixed to 1 sutra. Yesterday's class.
It's not 2 sutras mixed with 1 sutra. It's basically 2 conditions combined together, not 2 sutras. 2 conditions, right? Eti edhati is 1 condition and ut is another condition. You can combine whatever conditions. See, yoga vibhaga is done only to justify prayogas that Panini himself cannot justify with his sutras. So if you just take the full sutram Gurorandrutanantasyapi ekaikasya pracham, you cannot simply take the word plutaha and only link it with pracham without linking with Guru Anarantu and so on. So then how will you justify sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate? In order to justify sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate, you have to do the yoga vibhaga. Clear? Any further questions? Okay. Agre gacchamaha. The next one is pragruhya. The pragruhya samya is very simple actually. Pragruhyaha iti ashtadhyayam pathita kachit samya asti. Vishishta prakarakasya prakaraka varnanam noche shabdanam krute pragruhyam iti samya datta vartate. So all the way in the beginning, those of you who have memorized will probably know this particular section comes all the way at the beginning of Ashtadhyayi. Idude dvivachanam pragruhyam. So this is the pragruhya samya that is given starting from idude dvivachanam pragruhyam adaso mache nipateka janang ot sambuddhau shakalye setavanashe uyaha u and finally idutau cha saptamyarthe. So starting from 1-1-11, I'll bring all that in the screen. So starting from 1-1-11 up to 1-1-19, this entire set gives something called as pragruhya samya. So pragruhya, pragruhyam or pragruhya iti ashtadhyayam pathita kachit samya vartate. Some specific letters or some specific words is called pragruhyam. And some people have this confusion. You might not have because you don't know what a pragruhyam is, but somehow I have seen some students for no reason, they somehow think that pragruhyam means avyaya. Probably because avyaya samya is also there in Prathamadhyaya only. prathama pada only, very close to the pragruhya samya. But it is not like that. Pragruhya does not mean avyaya. So you might say, why I'm adding this bullet? I'm not adding to confusion. I'm just saying that there were some people who had confusion, so I'm just clarifying it. So pragruhyam ityukte avyayam iti na केचन प्रगृह्य सम्यकाः अव्यय सम्यकाः अपि सन्ति परन्तु सर्वे प्रगृह्य सम्यकाः अव्यय सम्यकाः न. So there are 9 sutras that give the pragruhya samya. Some of them are actually pragruhya samya given to avyayas, but not all sutras are going to give pragruhya samya to the avyayas. So what is the particular section? As I mentioned, प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमे पादे ईदुदे द्विवचनं प्रगृह्यम् इत्यस्मात् आरभ्य ईदूतौ च सप्तम्यर्थे इति यावन्ति सूत्राणि प्रगृह्य संज्ञायाः विधानं कुर्वन्ति. So starting from 1.1.11 up to 1.1.19, in this section we are going to learn only 2 sutras. The first 2, ईदुदे द्विवचनं प्रगृह्यम् and adasomat. These are the only 2 sutras that we are going to learn in this particular course. So asya prakaranasya, atra asmin prakane dasha sutrani santi, asya prakaranasya kevalam dve sutre eva asmabhi adhiyate. And obviously pragruhya samya kimartham datta asti pluta pragrihya achinityam ityadishu sthaleshu asyaha samyayaha prayogaha bhavati. So pragruhya samyaka varnaha or shabdaha achvarne pare nityam prakrutya bhavanti tesham kadapi sandhirna bhavati iti asya sutrasya ashayah. Let's go to the first one. Idude dvivachanam pragruhyam. Very simple. Idudet ityukte. So this is the samya sutra. It gives the pragruhya samya. Idudet is basically eat, oot, and ate. Dvivachanam pragruhyam. So what entity is being called pragruhya? Eat dvivachanam. There is a tadanta vidhi going on. Eat dvivachanam. इत्युक्ते दीर्घ ईकारांत द्विवचनम. Any dvivachana, it can be tinganta dvivachana or subanta dvivachana. Any dvivachana that is dirgha ikaranta. It can be any vibhakti, it can be any purusha, it has to be dvivachana. So the middle column, the dvivachanasya rupam, which is dirgha ikaranta, eat dvivachanam. So mati, muni, varini, jagati. So jagati, jaganti. So that's jagati. So all these are dirgha ikaranta dvivachana rupani. These are called pragruhya. Dirgha ukaranta dvivachanam. Sadhu, dhenu. These are called pragruhya. And ekaranta, ekara is always dirgha. So ekaranta dvivachanam, dirgha ekaranta, male, vane, dve, pachete. So that's tinganta, pachate, pachete, pachante. So pachete. So dirgha ekaranta, dirgha ukaranta, and dirgha ekaranta dvivachanam pragruhya samyakam bhavati. The entire word is called pragruha. So it is not only the ikara which is called pragruha or ukara which is called pragruha, it is the entire word which is called pragruha. And pragruhya, not pragruha. Entire word is called pragruhya. Anena sutrena sampurnasya shabdasya pragruhya samya bhavati. So there is nothing to explain in this sutram. That's all. Dirgha ikaranta, dirgha ukaranta, dirgha ekaranta dvivachanasya rupam pragruhya samyakam bhavati. Pragruhya pradeshaha pluta pragruhya achinityam ityevam adayaha. The immediate next sutram, adasomat. Adasomat sutram says that adas iti sarvanama samyakaha shabdaha asti. Adas. So most of you hopefully will know. Tad, etat, idam probably are more familiar. Adas is little less familiar. But adas iti sarvanama samyakaha shabdaha asti. So I have here that presented in the shabda patha. So it is a sakaranta sarvanama shabda. It can become, because it is sarvanama, you can get it in pullinga, strilinga, napumsakalinga and so on. So adas iti shabdasya mat इत्युक्ते मकारात् परस्य इकारः उकारः एकारः प्रगृह्य सम्यकः भवति. So that idudet comes as an anuvrutti. Adasah mat इत्युक्ते अदस् शब्दस्य मकारात् परस्य idudet pragruhyam bhavati. So so dvivachana is not coming now. Dvivachana was only in the previous sutram. Here only eat, ut and et are coming as an anuvrutti, and additional constraint of adas shabdasya makarat parasya ikarah ukarah ekarah iti atra sthapitam vartate. So adas iti shabdasya makarat parasya दीर्घ ईकारः दीर्घ उकारः दीर्घ एकारः च प्रगृह्य सम्यकः भवति. सो अदसः मात् इत्युक्ते अदस् शब्दस्य यः मकारः तस्मात् परः ईदुदेत्, I should have written ईदुदेत्, दीर्घ ईकारः दीर्घ उकारः दीर्घ एकारः प्रगृह्य सम्यकः भवति. सो अदस् इति प्रातिपदिकस्य सुबन्तरूपेषु विद्यमानः यः मकारः तस्माद् परः विद्यमानः दीर्घ ईकारः दीर्घ उकारः दीर्घ एकारः च प्रगृह्य सम्यकः भवति. अनेन सूत्रेण वर्णस्य प्रगृह्य सम्या भवति. So the previous one was the entire word nadi, sadhu, pachete and so on. Here it is varna. It is the actual ikara that comes after makara, or dirgha ukara that comes after makara. That is the pragriya samyaka. So the question is, what are these rupas? So adas pratipadikasya keshu rupeshu makara, somebody is saying on the chat, amu, ami, correct. So keshu rupeshu makaradanantaram ikaraha, ukaraha, ekaraha vidyate. So let's look at one by one. Pullinga, here is the table. What all do you see? Amu, so makaradanantaram ukaraha. Ami, makaradanantaram ikaraha. Dvivachana is not the constraint over here. So I can go in bahuvachana also. Amu, makarad anantaram ukaraha. In no other cases you will find makarad anantaram ukaraha or ikaraha or ikaraha. You can see here amishu, there is raswa ukara. So it is not dirgha and it is not after makara. So in many cases you can cross check, but there is no such constraint possible. Only in amu and ami in the pullinga forms. So let's now then go to the strilinga. So in the strilinga forms, again you have amu, dvivachanam of dvitiya amu, and this is not there. Amuhu of bahuvachanam cannot be considered. So the circles were of the previous slide. So but dvitiya dvivachanam, prathama dvivachanam amu, and dvitiya dvivachanam amu. And then let's go to the napumsakalinga. In the napumsakalinga also same thing. Amu from prathama dvivachanam and amu of dvitiya dvivachanam. So essentially collecting all the pullinga, strilinga, napumsakalinga together, pullinge amu iti asti, pullinge ami iti api asti, strilinge amu iti asti, napumsakalinge amu iti asti. So eventually the entire exercise was to finally conclude that adas shabdasya amu iti yad rupam asya subanta rupasya ante vidyamanah ukarah and ami iti rupam asya subanta rupasya ante vidyamanah ikarah etau varno pragruhya samyakau staha iti asya sutrasya ashayah. And remember, what was the anuvrutti? Idudet. So there was ikara, there was ukara, and there was ekara which is coming as an anuvrutti. But that ekara is useless because you don't have ame or any such form. So adas shabdasya rupeshu makarat paraha ekaraha naiva vartate. Ataha asmin sutre idudet ityasmat et ityasya anuvrutti na avashyaki. Why take unnecessary anuvrutti? So only take it and ud. So that was actually the reason why on the previous slide, if you see, I had written idut. It was not a mistake. Earlier, the earlier version of the slide only had idut, but then later on I thought let me make idudet everywhere. So there is no example of ekara. So technically you can only take the anuvrutti of it and ut. So what Siddhanta Kaumudikara essentially says is that idudet ityasmat et ityasya anuvrutti avashyaki eva nasti kevalam it plus ut ityeva paryaptam iti Kaumudikarena uktam asti. Kashikakara takes a separate stand. He says that there is no need to break words like this. Take the entire anuvrutti and say it is useless. It is definitely not harmful. Just say it is useless. So Kashikakarena tu ईदुदेत् इत्यस्य सर्वस्यापि अनुवृत्तिं कृत्वा एकारस्य नास्ति उदाहरणम् इति स्पष्टीकृतं वर्तते. Any questions so far, Ratnakar Mahoday?
Acharya, one question. If you remember, last time once I asked, what was your approach to this? Now, for example, Yidude Dvivachanam. Having said that sutra at the end as a tagline, you said, this is Padanta Vidhi. Having seen a sutra, how to look at that way? That is my question. You said Padanta Vidhi, Tadanta Vidhi. So, in many of the sutras, you wrote like this in the website.
Oh, that's
So, how to look at it?
you will automatically come to know that if you read the sutra of Tadanta Vidhi, Yena Vidhis Tadantasya properly. So, Yena Vidhis Tadantasya has, I've taught that in one of the classes, it has certain conditions. As soon as those conditions are met, you will do the Tadanta Vidhi. So, anytime I am writing Tadanta Vidhi or Tadadi Vidhi on the slides, it's not from commentaries or it's not from my own mind. It's automatically applying the sutras Yena Vidhis Tadantasya or Yasmin Vidhis Tadado Valgrani.
That's what I am asking.
So just
how
go.
To look at that way in a sutra?
Sorry, what?
I think I'm clear.
Okay, perfect.
Having seen you do that Dvivachanam Praguriyam, you said Tadanta Vidhi. Fine. But I do not know how to look at that way. This is Tadanta Vidhi.
You will automate. That's what I said. You will understand that this is Tadanta Vidhi when you will understand the exact meaning of Tadanta Vidhi. Tadanta Vidhi means Visheshana Vishesham Asti Tatra Tadanta Vidhi Vartate. You just go back and listen to that class again. So here you can see that Idu Det is Visheshanam and Dvivachanam is Visheshanam. That you can clearly see. Then obviously the Tadanta Vidhi will follow. Clear?
And one more thing from 31st class, Acharya. Here you have given Chitram Ramasya Alaye Krishnasya. They're still in that sentence construction. There is a confusion. Normally in Sanskrit, that sort of a thing doesn't happen. And of course, as you know, any word can be placed in any sentence, in the sentence in Sanskrit. So here it appears to be like Krishnasya Chitram in Rama, like that. This thing is there, confusion is there. How to decipher this or look at this?
No, the confusion is at the heart of all sutras. I always give these examples. So, Devau Asurau Hatavantau. So, the two gods killed two asuras. Devau Asurau Hatavantau. So, who killed whom? You can say Asurau Devau Hatavantau, right? Is both in Dvitiya. So, then the confusion is at the heart of all, and the beauty of language is that this confusion makes two different meanings possible, causing various alankaras and so on. So, and text is known, you cannot understand the meaning at all.
Okay, only in the context only we have to look at it and then decipher the meaning.
I said let's keep this aside because I have to finish a few more slides, so we'll come to that maybe sometimes later. Okay, let's focus on the topic first. Okay, so we finished Idude Dvivachanam Pragruyam, we finished Adaso Math. Now there is an interesting question, and it's a Shastra question. I actually wanted to teach that, but we are running significantly short of time. So I am going to just park it. There are slides. You can study it on your own. Or if you want, I can take 20 more minutes and teach it, but we are already running quite beyond the stipulated time. So let me first give you the question. I'll show you the slides and then we will take a call. So observe what is happening. In the others word, what all are getting Pragruya Samya? It is the Amu word, which is Makara. It is the Amu word, which is the Ukaraha present after Makaraha. And it is the Ami word, which is Ikaraha present after Makaraha. Now let us forget this constraint on Makara. Let's say adashabdasya yasya yasya rupasya ante dirgha ikaraha. No chet yasya yasya rupasya ante dirgha ukara. Ante is also not needed anywhere. Yasmin rupe ikaraha dirgha ikaraha. No chet yasmin rupe dirgha ukaraha vidyate. Tasya dirgha ukarasya rukarasya cha. Dirgha ikarasya ukarasya cha pragruya samya bhavati. So I am saying temporarily, let's forget the math condition, because when there is a makarottaraha ikaraha at the end, we are all talking about at the end. So when there is a makarottaraha ikaraha or ukaraha at the end, it's amu that is coming in the picture. Now you look at all other rupas, there is no dirgha ikara or there is no dirgha ukara anywhere at the end. In amuyoho there is a rasva ukara. In amishu there is a dirgha ikara but it is not at the end. So if you look at any other words, there is no dirgha ikara or dirgha ukara, and same thing is for pullinga and strilinga also. So what is happening is that if you just get rid of the word mat, you don't put the condition of makara and you just say adas shabdasya subanta rupasya ante vidyamanaha dirgha ukaraha and adas shabdasya subanta rupasya ante vidyamanaha dirgha ikara, ikara and ukara both are pragriya. Even if you create that much particular constraint or sutra, still the only words that you are going to filter out are amu and ami. There are no other words like ti or she or p where some other letter might have ikara or ukara at the end or after that particular letter. So why make the sutram more complex and say makaradanantaram vidyamanaha ikaraha, nochet makaradanantaram vidyamanaha ukaraha, and so on. So the student asks, so what I am presenting on this slide is a acharya and a chhatra dialogue, a dialogue between guru and shishya, the student and the teacher. Lots of complex shastra concepts can be very beautifully explained in form of such a dialogue. In fact, when I took the Kridanta course many years ago, almost every shastra concept I explained it in form of an interaction between teacher and student, and that's what I'm trying to replicate over here. So छात्रः पृच्छति यदि शब्दे यदि सूत्रे मात् इति शब्दः एव न स्यात् तर्हि कः दोषः? So there is, let's say the sutram is only adaso. You can bring idute, anuvrittis and so on, and adaso is the sutram. So then Acharya will say, or Acharya says as an answer, adas shabdasya rupanam ante vidyamanaha ikaraha ukaraha ekaraha pragriya samyakaha bhavati. So the meaning will only be this one, not makaradanantaram, but just ante vidyamanaha ikaraha ukaraha ekaraha. And then what will be the problem? Makara bhinnat varnad anantaram vidyamanasya ikara ukarasya ekarasya api अनिष्ट प्रगृह्य संज्ञा भवेत् इति दोषः आगच्छेत् is what Acharya is trying to explain. Now understand that Acharya will never give the full answer right away. He wants to test the student. He wants to understand whether the answer that I have given is digestible by the student and a cross question is asked or not asked. So this is how from the vada, from the interaction, tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena. So from the pariprashna only the shastra unfolds in front of you. So Acharya gives this example and the student is not an idiot. He says, I have seen the Subanta tables. Adas shabdasya Subanta rupani pashyamaschet kevalam amu tatha ami etayoho rupayoho ante eva ikaraha nochet ukaraha nochet ekaraha vidyate makar bhinna varnat अनंतरम विद्यमानस्य ईकार एकार एकारस्य उदाहरणम एव नास्ति. So if you look at the table, it is only amu and ami. So you could have just said dirgha ukaranta word and dirgha ikaranta word. There is no need of putting a makara over here. And then the Acharya says, this is where I'm going to leave it to you. I'm not going to teach ahead. Acharya says, etadrusham ekam udaharanam avashyam asti. He says there is a word called amukke. Amukke iti adakas shabdasya pullingasya bahuvachanam asti. There is a word called adakas, very similarly sounding to adas. There is a word called adakas. The prathama bahuvachanam of adakas is amukke. Asmin rupe vidyamanah ekaraha makarad anantaram na vidyate. Asya ekarasya pragruhya samya na ishyate. So in order to block the pragruhya samya of the ekara present in the amuke word, that mat is required in the sutram, is what Acharya says. And then probably just like most of you, the student is doubly confused. Student says, what are you talking? We are talking about the word called adas. You are giving a form amuke which is generated by the word adakas. So altogether different word you are quoting, and then you are saying that there is a form called amuke. But what all that has to do with the adas word? Stay on the topic. Don't deviate. So atra bhavata adakas iti kaschana bhinnah shabdah nirdishtah. प्रकृत सूत्रम तो आदर्श शब्दस्य विषये अस्ति. So he said, did you forget? We are talking about the others word and you are randomly quoting adakas word. And then the teacher apparently ignores what he is asking, what he is saying. And the teacher says, let me first tell you what this adakas word is. Adakas iti shabdaha, akach adas iti shabda. So you start with the word called adas. Asmat adas iti shabdat swarthe akach pratyayam yojayitva siddhyati. So there is a pratyaya called akach. It is a tadhita pratyaya. You add the akach pratyaya to the adas word. So adas iti shabdat akach iti pratyayah kriyate, and when you add the akach pratyaya to the adas word, there is this new word which is created, which is called adakas, and this adakas has this form amuke, which should not get the pragruhya samya. Therefore that makara is present in the sutram, is what the acharya is trying to say. And the students is doubly confused. Student says, what I am talking, what you are talking, bhavatu nama, whatever you are talking is okay. Whatever that akach pratyay is okay. Barantu adas shabdaha akach pratyay nirmita adakas shabdat bhinnaha asti. If the sutram is about adas word, why are you giving me examples of adakas word? If there is a sutram that talks about the bala word, you cannot just create, say, balaka or say mahabala word and apply the sutram for that. The sutram is for others word. You are talking about an irrelevant adakas word. So come on track. So akach pratyaya kutrapi vidiyeta. It can be added to anybody or anywhere. Adas shabdaha akach pratyay nirbitaha adakas shabdat bhinnaha asti. Tarhi asya sutrasya sandarbhena adakas shabdasya chintanam na uchitam. So the student is still confused, and now the acharya gives the answer, which I'm going to leave to you as homework. I would have loved to teach, but we are strictly running out of time. There is a question in the homework on this, I think. Adaso matiti sutre madgranam kimartham. So read that slide. If nobody of you is able to understand, I will explain it in some other class whenever we get time. But for now, I have only explained the problem to you. There is a detailed explanation given by the acharya on that particular problem. The student does not agree to it. Student has another sub question, and then the teacher gives the full and final explanation. So read this particular slide as a homework and then attempt that question from the homework. If there is a significant amount of confusion or nothing is clear, I'll explain this in one of the upcoming classes. But this is a detailed Shastra Vishaya, so there is no need to focus on that at the moment. I know there is a hand raised, but let's go to one last slide. Pluta Pragriya Achinityam. Having learned Plutas and Pragriyas, now the actual Prakriti Bhava Sutram. Pluta Pragriya Achinityam Prakrutya Tishtanti. So Pluta Pragriyaha Achi Samhitayam Nityam Prakrutya Tishtanti Ityukte Teshu Parivartanam na bhavati. Pluta Samyaka Varnanam Pragriya Samyaka Shabdanam Cha Achvarane Pare Samhitayaha Vivakshayam Api Sandhihi na bhavati. Some examples. Agacharama Atra Gaushcharati. Here are two sentences spoken together. अस्मिन् वाक्ये राम शब्दस्य मकारोत्तरस्य अकारस्य प्लुतसंज्ञायां सत्यां. You can use duradhute ch to make the makarottara akara pluta. So agaccha rama iti ukte agre atra iti shabdena sah savarna dirghah na sambhavati. मुनि एतौ इत्यत्र मुनि शब्दस्य प्रगृह्य संज्ञायां सिद्धायां तत्र संधिः न भवति. साधु उत्तमौ सेम प्रगृह्य संज्ञायां सत्यां संधि न भवति. पचावहे आवाम. I am giving one example. Eat, ut and et. Vivachanam pragruhyam. And finally, the other shabda, amu asate इत्यत्र अमु शब्दस्य उकारस्य प्रगृह्यसंज्ञायां सिद्धायाम् अत्र उकारस्य नकारोत्तरस्य इकारस्य उकारेण सह अत्र उकारस्य टाइपिंग मिस्टेक अत्र उकारस्य यणादेशः न प्रवर्तते. So that's all about. So there is nothing in this sutram. Pluta pragrihya achinityam. Let's do dalakrutyam and we'll stop. So dalakrutyam. Pluta pragrihyaha iti kimartham. So if it is not a pluta and if it is not a pragrihya, then this sutram is not applicable. So if you take vane, which is saptami ekvachanam, then atra vane shabdaha pluta vane shabdasya ekaraha plutaha nasti and vane iti shabdasya pragrihya samya nasti. It is saptami ekvachanam. अस्यां स्थितौ अत्र संधिः अवश्यं भवति. Another example, आगच्छ राजन् अत्र गौश्चरति. अस्मिन् वाक्ये जकारोत्तरः अकारः प्लुतसंज्ञकः अस्ति. So आगच्छ राजन् is one sentence, अत्र गौश्चरति is another sentence. So राजन् इत्यस्य जकारोत्तरः अकारः प्लुतः अवश्यम् अस्ति, परन्तु नकारः प्लुतः नास्ति. So नकारस्य संधिः भवितुम् अर्हति. नकारस्य गमुडागम संधि अवश्यं संभवति. आगच्छ राजन्नत्र गौश्चरति. So agaccha, then rajannatra gaushcharati. So that nakara can participate in the gamudagama sandhi. It is the akara which is pluta and pragrihya, and that is blocked. The nakara is not blocked. So that's the reason why pluta pragrihyaha is given. Achi iti kimartham. Atra achi iti padam saptamyanta nirdeshartham asti. I have already explained this. पूर्व निमित्तम अस्ति चेत् अस्य सूत्रस्य प्रयोगः न भवति. परवर्णस्य संदर्भेण एव अयं प्रकृति भावः, पूर्ववर्णस्य संदर्भेण न इति स्पष्टीकर्तुम् अत्र अचि इति पदं विद्यते. एतादृशस्य प्लुतस्वरस्य पूर्ववर्णेन सह संधि अवश्यं संभवति. आगच्छ प्लस एकदन्त with an ekara that is pluta, you can still do agacchaikadanta. I've already explained that earlier. And finally, we'll finish in 2 minutes. Last point is nityam iti kimartham. Pluta pragrihyaha achinityam. Let's actually go to pluta pragrihyaha achinityam. Nityam iti kimartham. The reason why this particular sutram uses the word nityam is that the pluta pragrihya achinityam talks about the prakriti bhava that is compulsory. The rest sutras talk about prakriti bhava that is optional. The reason why nityam word is used in pluta pragrihya achinityam is that for the remaining sutras where the prakriti bhava is told optionally, that rule cannot be applied for plutas and pragrihyas. So plutas and pragrihyas will always exhibit prakriti bhava, even though other rules like iko savarne shakalya rasvascha or rutyakaha or any other rules seem to be applicable to that plutas and pragrihyas, still that option will not be used. Plutas and pragrihyas will compulsorily exhibit prakriti bhava. That is the reason why the word nityam is used. So asya prakriti bhava prakaranasya अन्यैः सूत्रैः भिन्नेषु स्थलेषु विकल्पेन आदेशः उक्तः अस्ति, विकल्पेन प्रकृति भावः उक्तः अस्ति, परन्तु तैः सूत्रैः उक्तः विकल्पः प्लुतस्वराणां संदर्भेण प्रगृह्य सम्यक शब्दानां संदर्भेण न स्वीकर्तव्यः. इत्युक्ते प्लुताः प्रगृह्याः च प्रकृतसूत्रस्य आधारेण एव प्रकृत्या तिष्ठन्ति. अस्य प्रकरणस्य अन्यैः सूत्रैः उक्तः विकल्पः तेषां विषये न प्रवर्तते इति दर्शयितुं. Now there is an example, but you can ignore that or you can read it separately on your own. अस्य निर्देशार्थम् अत्र सूत्रे नित्यम iti uktam asti. So that completes 5 sutra. I actually thought this class will be over in 1 hour, but it's taking too much time. I probably have to cut down the amount that I'm teaching in one class. Let's see. So these are the 5 sutras that we discussed today. Here is the homework. Adaso mat iti sutre mat granam kimartham. This is self-study. Sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate. I have taught this. Tripadya siddha pluta swaraha ats. Tripadya nirmitaha plutaha swaraha. Tripadya nirmitaha plutaha swaraha. Ach sandhikaryasya krute siddha katham bhavati. I have explained that. दूरादुच्चारिते ओदनं भुङ्ध्वं दृष्टद्युम्न इत्यत्र कः स्वरः प्लुतः भवितुमर्हति? वाक्यानि लिखत. सिंपल वन. And ईदुदे द्विवचनं प्रगृह्यम् इति सूत्रस्य स्ववाक्येन अर्थं लिखित्वा सर्वाणि उदाहरणानि दर्शयत. Again very simple. Second is again very simple question. दलकृत्यं प्रदर्शयत गुरोरनृतोऽनन्तस्याप्यैकेयस्य प्राचा and प्लुत प्रगृह्य अचिनित्यम्. So questions are simple. You are free to exit the session if you want. There are some hands raised, so I'll take them and then I'll conclude. Geeta Bhagini.
Mahoday, Adasomat. Let's go to others. The sutra, in the sutra, sutra's meaning, it never said like makara tanantara idude whatever e and dirgha but it's never saying that it should be a last makara.
Correct. So that you understand from the Vyakhyana. That is a correct, good point. But you understand it from the Vyakhyana. Adasaha makarat parau idauto pragriya samnyusyatam. This does not say antimaha, but that is what you learn from the Vyakhyana. I think I must have written this in Sutrartha. I forgot. Tasmad paraha vidyamana antimaha dirghokara ekara cha pragriya samnyakaha bhavati. Another interesting point is, let us say there is no dirgha ikar, ante bhavet iti condition nasti, iti niyamah nasti iti bhavet. So what will happen in case of amishu, that dirgha ikara which is present in amishu, in between that amishu, that will be pragruhya. The point is, let it be pragruhya. The use of having pragruhya is to block ach sandhi. But there is no ach sandhi possible of that ikara with the shu that is present later. So let it quietly sit as pragruhya. Who cares? Understood? So the real purpose of making pragruhya is towards the end. So that is the meaning that is taken on a practical note. But it doesn't really matter if in amibhyaha, amibhihi, amisham, in all those cases, it remains at the end, doesn't really matter.
Okay. And the next question is, agacha, I mean, like last but one slide, I think. Agacha Rama Gaushcharatya. Atra Gaushcharatya. Here, in the first line, Rama Makara is Plutaha, hence we cannot do Atsandhi, right?
Correct.
But with Guror Anantya, with that sutra, we can make a Ra, because Ra is a Guru Samyaka word, we make it as a Pluta, and we can continue with that Sandhi, right?
Correct. That is correct. So it all depends on which letter you make pluta. It all depends on that. And eventually sarvaha plutaha vikalpyate. So it's all optional. You can just forget about plutas and go ahead with agacha rama plus atra. That is also possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Further questions?
That's it.
You should feel free to, everybody should feel free to exit. I have taken a lot of time, your valuable time, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll continue. Vidya Bhagini.
क्षम्यतां महोदय, समयातीतता धन्यवादः। तत्र भवान् उक्तवान् किल, तत्र प्राचाम् इत्यत्र, तत्र प्राच्याम् इत्यस्य आवश्यकता कुतः महोदय? तत्र तत् नास्ति चेदपि वयं प्राचां नाम तस्य पृथक्करणं किमर्थम् आवश्यकम् इति पृच्छामि। तत्र तथा न क्रियते चेदपि तत्र प्रगृह्यं क्षम्यतां, तत्र प्राचाम् इत्यस्य अनुवृत्तिरूपेण सर्वत्र नेतुं शक्नुमः किल?
न सर्वत्र अनुवृत्तिरूपेण नेतुं शक्नुमः, परन्तु प्लुतः प्राचाम् इति सूत्रं तत्र निर्मातव्यं। तादृशं कथं कर्तुं शक्यते? प्राचाम् इति अग्रिमेषु सूत्रेषु अनुवृत्तिरूपेण भवितुमर्हति, परन्तु प्राचां मतेन अग्रिमेषु सूत्रेषु पूर्वस्मिन् सूत्रे विद्यमाना या प्लुता तस्य किं करणीयम्? अतः पृथक् रूपेण प्राचाम् इति शब्दः संस्थाप्यते, तत्र प्लुतः प्राचाम् इति सरलं सूत्रं निर्माय तस्य अर्थविधानं क्रियते।
अस्तु, धन्यवादः।
You can say, I mean, apakarsha, you can take apakarsha and so on. So that's another way, but that's not much cleaner. So yoga vibhaga is actually much cleaner. Geeta Bhagini, do you still have a question or you already answered?
already answered one. But still, Mother, when Pluta is Vikalpa, then I mean, like, why we have to consider all these things?
Correct. That's a very valid question. And you should have got this question in many earlier cases. The reason is you have to consider because the language is there like that. So, Agachha Rama Atra Gaushtarati can be pronounced with Ra as a pluta. It can be pronounced with Ma as a pluta. And all these prayogas used to exist in language. And the purpose of grammar is to show those prayogas, not to create unnecessary complexity. So, the prayogas were there, so you have to study it. That's all the correct answer is. So this is, I mean, Ashtadhyayi has so many weird corner cases, small rules here and there and so on. So that Pratyabhivadre Ashudre, the rule that I did not teach, that also is like that, very corner case. But rules existed, the language existed like that, so the rules have been created. Anyway, the classes are becoming longer and longer, but I'll take this as a feedback and I'll try to cut down the material taught in one class. But the restriction that I have put on myself is to make sure that entire Ashtadhyayi is covered. So I don't want to spend 20 classes, 15 classes on just Sandhis. I want to teach also Karakas, Samasas, Tingantas, Krudantas, Tadhitas and so on. So I have put a restriction of 10 classes. This is a self-imposed restriction. So I have put a restriction of 10 classes for each module. If some sutra is left out, that's okay because this is still Ashtadhyayi Parichayaha. Once you have a full-fledged sound understanding of these 600 sutras, in any further course that you will learn, you can learn those sutras. So I'll make sure going ahead to cut down the sutras so that we can finish in maximum 1 hour 30 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes and so on. Samapayamaha. अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनये नमः शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमले शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः धन्यवादः।